know, these vision pans are truly remarkable, whether you're whisking, bashing, or scraping. Ice cold, red hot. Look at that, it's still a vision. Holds the heat too. And when things start to boil, you turn the cooker down. Or off. And what could be better in the microwave? Apart from my cooking. And with Vision's 10-year-long life guarantee, you can't go wrong.
Vision, it's visibly superior.
Absolutely. And here's one I burnt earlier.
Now from Imperial Leather, a new shampoo, Imperial Leather Gold. Rich and creamy, with no fancy ingredients your hair doesn't need. A light, gentle shampoo that gives your hair natural-looking body and shine.
Finished!
And that unique touch of Imperial Leather luxury. New Imperial Leather Gold. Simple luxury for natural hair.
I'm a fashion model. I'm right on top. Always busy, no time to stop. I drink instant Bovril when my body's on go. 1 cup, 20 calories. That's real low. It's quick to mix. It's the taste for me. Instant Bovril. Naturally, whatever the city, you'll hear my voice. Instant Bovril, a natural choice.
To enjoy life as much as you do today, plan your pension now. Turn to Norwich. Go to work looking forward to a good pension and a tax-free cash sum. Turn to Norwich. Help build a secure future for yourself and your family. Turn to Norwich. Turning to Norwich Union is as easy as talking to an independent financial advisor.
Glad to be of help.
We're sure you'll agree, for pensions you're better off the Norwich way.
You found anything?
Not yet.
I smell something suspicious.
That's funny. I can smell fresh, crisp apples. That's not in the script.
Apple ties. It's well worth sniffing out the taste.
Now it's over to ITN for the very latest news.
The news at 5:45 with Alistair Stewart.
Sir Geoffrey says charges against British diplomat would be trumped up. Secret army factions say they murdered Lebanon's Prime Minister. Labour mock Lord Young's claim that Labour will boost unemployment. And less drink and no pitch invasions for the first test. Good evening. The Foreign Secretary, Sir Geoffrey Howe, says he'll take diplomatic action soon unless Iran explains and apologises for kidnapping a British diplomat in Tehran. Mr. Edward Chaplin was beaten up and held by armed men last week. Sir Geoffrey said planned charges of corruption against Mr. Chaplin would be trumped up. It's now been revealed that an Iranian diplomat who was arrested by police in Manchester was given his passport back. Mrs Thatcher said charges against Mr. Chaplin would be outrageous.
In Tehran, British diplomat Edward Chaplin is staying safe on embassy territory and has still not been told officially of any charges to be brought against him. Under international law, Mr. Chaplin is immune to any sort of legal action and cannot be removed from embassy property. But Iranian interpretation of international law differs from that of Britain. The Iranian vice-consul in Manchester, charged with shoplifting offences, is a lower-ranking diplomat and not immune from prosecution, according to the Vienna Convention. But in a statement issued at their embassy this afternoon, Iranian diplomats insisted the arrest of their vice-consul was unlawful. Mrs Thatcher entered the fray this morning.
We shall keep up pressure in Tehran. The charges against Mr. Chaplin we think are outrageous. The matter here is totally unconnected with that. The matter here is a matter for the police.
I've reviewed the whole matter this morning. I've taken certain decisions, but I'm not obviously in a position to make any statement about those yet. The Iranians have denied that there's any linkage between the charges trumped up against Mr. Chaplin and the charges brought against their own consul in this country. Frankly, it's very difficult to believe that they are not connected.
The Lebanese Prime Minister, Mr. Rashid Karami, has been assassinated. Mr. Karami, a Muslim, was killed while flying between Beirut and Tripoli. A bomb in a briefcase exploded under his seat in an army helicopter. A group of army officers calling themselves the Lebanese Secret Army say they did it. The Lebanese president, Mr. Gemayel, who's a Christian, has declared a week of official mourning.
The helicopter was on the way from Tripoli to Beirut when the bomb exploded under Rashid Karami's seat. The pilot managed to fly another 12 miles to a military airstrip despite being injured himself. Karami was rushed to a nearby hospital, but is reported to have died from his wounds before surgeons could operate. Karami, who was serving his 9th term as Prime Minister, is the most prominent casualty of a 12-year-old civil war which has already claimed so many victims. Karami's decision to invite Syrian troops into Muslim West Beirut to end 3 years of fighting between rival militia factions made him a target for Christian hardliners in the east of the city. An anti-Syrian group of army officers called the Lebanese Secret Army has claimed responsibility for the assassination. Karami had been leading a Muslim boycott of Lebanon's Christian President Amin Gemayel, which had virtually paralyzed the government since the beginning of last year. But President Gemayel has now ordered a week of official mourning for Karami and an immediate investigation into his death.
In the election campaign here, the argument's been about jobs and the economy. For the Alliance, Dr Owen said the Conservatives should stop pretending Britain had done better than other European countries. He said Mrs Thatcher would be like the sorcerer's apprentice at the financial summit in Venice next week, cooking the books. The Employment Secretary, Lord Young, said Labour and Alliance policies would destroy jobs. Labour's, he said, would throw 1 million people out of work. Minimum wage legislation, he said, would cost 600,000 jobs alone. The Labour leader, Mr Kinnock, said the claim was ridiculous and said Mrs Thatcher had put much of Britain's manufacturing industry out of business.
The Conservatives hit back over jobs this morning. Employment Secretary Lord Young claiming that under Labour, unemployment would go up, not down.
The opposition has policies which would rapidly destroy jobs. And the only policy they have is to return to old-style reflation.
And he presented a wilting Labour red rose alongside figures he said added up to 1 million jobs lost under Labour. Mrs Thatcher then confronted another big issue, education, flying to a state secondary school in Kent. The children were given Tory party hats and flags to greet her, though she denied they were being used politically. Mrs Thatcher toured the craft and design centres and tried her hand at bricklaying, and she rebutted criticism that her government had starved schools of resources. And after that spot of labouring, Mrs Thatcher put her hands on the wheel of a paddle steamer, where she answered Mr Kinnock's criticism that under the Tories, fewer people were producing fewer goods.
What does she want to do? Get rid of all machinery, all technology, and go back to doing things by hand? Isn't that the very thing that has brought increased prosperity, that has taken away the drudgery, that has taken away many of the dirty jobs? What is she trying to do?
Mrs Thatcher returned to her government's economic record, arguing from her mobile caravan in a Kent village that only the Conservatives guaranteed sound finance and future prosperity. Kevin Dunn, ITN, on the Thatcher campaign.
Mr Kinnock set out today to establish Labour as the party in the driving seat of any future economic recovery. Visiting a Midlands construction company, he castigated the Tory economic record. His team regarded Lord Young's claim that unemployment under Labour would leap by 1 million as something of a Tory-owned goal, replacing Polaris with hunter-killer submarines and nuclear power with coal and other power sources would, he said, create jobs. And on introducing a minimum wage,
they have to explain why it is that other economies can have a national minimum wage and it doesn't cost any jobs, it's actually generated jobs because of the additional stimulus to the economy. And they simply can't get away with that kind of preposterous allegation because it doesn't stand up in reality.
Trade and industry spokesman John Smith used British fridges, computers, bikes and car components to warn that the Tories' deepening trade deficit rendered these endangered species.
Let me remind you that in 1979 we had a surplus in the balance of trade of manufactured goods of £5 billion. Now, for the first time in Britain's economic history since the Industrial Revolution, we went into deficit in 1983.
Later, after Mr Kinnock had tried his hand at capping bottles of Windolene, he stressed that Labour would follow the French and German examples of defending domestically produced goods, and an investment bank would be set up to capture money currently leaving Britain for the modernisation of industry here. John Snow, ITN, on the Kinnock campaign in the East Midlands.